Okay, so welcome back to Wandering Cantos. Today I thought it would be fun to do something a little bit different from what we've been doing. And so I thought basically, why not use my English degree to try to do a close reading of Fuwamoco's latest song, Lifetime Showtime? I believe that a lot of real modern poetry actually lies within music, and I kind of feel like musicians sort of took the mantle of poetry. Not to say that there's not obviously modern poets, but if you add and incorporate musicians into that category, you can see that poetry is still very much extremely alive and vibrant and thriving. So I thought it could be sort of fun to take a look at some song lyrics and look at some of the, basically what you would do with a close reading. Look at some of the, the lyrics, some of the rhyme schemes, the meaning, sort of some of the devices, what they're trying to do, things like that. So if that sounds fun to you, get a drink, get comfortable, and let's just dive right into this and get into the close reading trenches. So we're going to start with the opening of the song, and also, as you can see, it's actually sort of the lyrics on two sides. One is the original lyrics, and the other is a translation I found online, since there's Japanese in this song. I'm going to take that into account, but I'll also kind of point out in some areas where there's basically some accidental rhymes, or at least near rhymes. So for example, a near rhyme here is we have wanna be together, and then at the end we have fluffy fuzzy yappy sisters. And while it's closer to be defined as a near rhyme, since it's you can have that H sound, so it's more of a together versus sister, but it's pretty close with the ER sound. So not actually in the actual performance, but I thought it was interesting that within the translation, there's sort of its own poetry, because anyone who's familiar with poetry will know that a huge section of poetry is dedicated to translation. So, for example, translations of the Odyssey and the Iliad from the ancient Greek to modern day English. So, worth noting. In terms of poetry, this is, also a rapid fire part of the song, so there's not a ton going on in terms of true poetry, but I think that this whole section basically serves as an opening thesis in which the narrators of the song introduce themselves. So we know that they are fluffy, fuzzy, yappy sisters, and they use the onomatopoeia of bow bow, which, is similar to, wolf or bark, which also with the adjectives describing these sisters, we realize that they are dogs of some sort, and we may get more information later on in the song about what type of dogs they are, but they're also sister dogs, so that's worth noting. We also know that there's sort of an upbeat sense of the moment, sort of a carpe diem thing, because with the sort of philosophy of carpe diem and seizing a moment, it's sort of like, this is the moment, don't wait for later, don't wait for the future, you're in the present, grasp it while you can, and also enjoy that moment, but also seize your ambitions, follow your dreams now, and don't wait for it. So here, they're saying it's showtime, and then later they're even describing that the future is bright. So they have each other because they're sisters. They are ready to, pursue their dreams. It's showtime, it's go time, and they're optimistic about the future. And again, they're also revealing a bit more about who they are. And so now let's see what the next, verse is, to see what else we can learn. So here we get where they sort of do a bit of a chant, and they're actually doing a portmanteau, or a blend, which is where they are taking two separate words and blending them into one word to sort of get a new meaning, or, sort of a blend and a twist. So, for example, breakfast plus lunch equals brunch. Here we have Fuwawa and Moco, but they're taking the beginnings of both, and we get Fuwamoco, which then becomes their sort of group name of Fuwamoco. So already there, you probably didn't think there was a lot of poetry going on here, but even here there is some interesting poetic devices being used. All right, and now as we get to this part, we get into finally the actual sort of meat of the song. So here's one of the first verses, and this is sung by Fuwawa. And there's kind of already a lot of interesting stuff going on in this passage. So, for example, if I can turn my pen green, we have the rhyme scheme of away, away. Then we have, and those are exact rhymes. Then let's see if we can make this blue. We got safe. So this gives us, to go back to our nice red pen, we got sort of an A, B, B, C rhyme scheme. And and with exact rhymes here. As for the actual lines and what they're describing, something else that's sort of interesting here is this is technically a piece of blank verse, because there is neither rhyme nor consistent structure, or I should say consistent rhyme and consistent structure. But interestingly enough, we do have a line that I believe you could argue is iambic pentameter. So we have, I'm so fluffy that even I could float away. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's actually an Alexandrine, I believe is the term for it. But we've got one of those there, and I always love when song lyrics still follow iambs, even if it's not iambic pentameter or even consistent, but having that sort of heartbeat, meter, and rhythm, it's just so natural to the English language, and so it's always fun when you see it kind of slip into music. Beyond that, we have sort of a very interesting opening line, which is, my heart and soul and tail are Fuwawa. So here, the speaker and narrator, which is Fuwawa, she is emphasizing that she is fully Fuwawa, and what the sort of both persona and sense of identity and self is as Fuwawa. Fuwawa isn't a mask she puts on when she's outside, but she is truly this. And I don't even just mean in terms of a VTuber relationship, but even as yourself, if your name is Keith, are you truly Keith? Are you the Keith that people look at and know as, and all of the adjectives and attributes that they project onto you? Is that who you are, or is there something else that you are truly inside? Here, Fuwawa is asserting that no, down to both her heart and her soul and her physical attributes, such as her tail, she is Fuwawa. And so, going back to what we saw in the beginning about that sort of carpe diem, seize the day, be yourself, she's also asserting her own sense of identity and self, so she's prepared to participate in the Showtime and seize the day, because she doesn't have any lingering doubts. This is who she is, she's proud of it, and this isn't going anywhere. She also uses some adjectives to describe herself. So again, learning a bit more about these dogs, we know that these dogs are so fluffy that they could even float away, which is also fun because it's sort of a I don't know what the actual official term for is, but it's almost like an unspoken metaphor, because while she hasn't used the terms like a cloud, which would be a simile, or, some sort of like water floating device, but she's creating the image that she's so fluffy, sort of like a cloud, that she can just float away. And so in that, she's making a comparison between herself and her own physical attributes and those of something else. So in that sense, I truly believe this is pretty dang close to being a metaphor. And then they are also sort of speaking to the audience here, because if she was speaking to Mokoko, she wouldn't be saying, "We're only a bark away." She'd be saying, "I'm only a bark away." But instead, this is, to the audience, or at least their intended audience, whether that is their fan base or someone specific. We don't know. But here they are saying, they're also asserting, not only are they Fuwawa, not only are they fluffy, but they're also like loyal and dedicated and reliable. They are asserting that they are a trustworthy, reliable person. You merely have to call for them, or since they're dogs, you only have to bark for them, and they will be there. And why is that? Do they have ill intention? Do they have, are they trying to be close to someone to manipulate them, to guard them, to, track them down? What is it? It is because their audience's smile is the treasure that they want to keep safe. So they are also asserting that their intentions are, pure. They care about the person that they're speaking to. The person they're saying, "Hey, just call for me. We're only a bark away." This person, or this group, again, if it's their fan base, their smile is the treasure that they want to keep safe. So they clearly care about this person, and they're also therefore inserting not only their intention, but their relationship, because they're also familiar enough with the person to know what their smile's like, etc. And they view it as a treasure. So here it is a metaphor in which they are comparing a smile to a treasure. If they had said, "Your smile is like a treasure," or, "I think of your smile as a treasure," then they would be doing a simile. But here they are doing a metaphor, because metaphorically, the smile may not literally be a, treasure chest full of gold, but to them it is just as valuable. So here we have, the next part, we have a repeat of the portmanteau, or the blend. And what's also sort of interesting is, as we realize as we go that, a good amount of this song is dedicated to sort of serving as a thesis of self, by them chanting their own name. They're adding, a sense of pride of who they are, and a sort of sense of almost self-patriotism. Again, with Fuwawa asserting that basically, her heart, her soul, and down to her bones, her body, her core, she is Fuwawa. It reminds me a lot of the English Romantics, and sort of, Romanticism is such a huge part of sort of the modern sense of cultural philosophy and the value of the individual, but also, we've been seeing more and more about how that individual then is a part of society and community. And so again, by chanting this, they are once again asserting themselves and their own identity. And then we jump right into Mokoko's passage. And if I remember correctly, here Fuwawa begins to sing as well. So it's both of them. So first, we will just take a look at just Mokoko's portion. So here, Mokoko is now asserting who she is and what her values are. So almost in contrast to Fuwawa, and also again with that romantic sense of self, there's a value of individuality. And so here we have two sisters who are both singing a song together and about their sort of identity together, but they're also taking time to describe themselves as individuals. So Mokoko loves being tricky. She loves doggy kisses, and she loves walks, but you don't need no leash for me, she says. Why that's important is because that is also asserting a certain level of loyalty, companionship, because the implication is that when someone walks their dog, they usually use the leash so the dog won't run away from them. So, if you don't need a leash, that implies that the dog will stay next to whoever they're walking with and won't be running away. So, you know, it conjures the image of someone getting to walk alongside their dog, and there's such a level of bond and trust between the two that, you know, there's no need for this sort of artificial, industrial, it's a chain, it's sort of this cold steel, artificial bond between two people. Because if they don't have a true bond, hypothetically, something like that as an artificial stand-in may be needed to keep them together. But in this relationship, that sort of thing isn't needed, even though sometimes this person might be a bit tricky, because that also implies a level of mischief. So here, you know, they're saying they also, within the sort of thesis and world of this poem, since these are dogs, they're saying that, you know, they like signs of affection, because also when I think of a dog, I think one of the acts of affection and bonding a person can do with the dog is taking them on walks, giving them doggy kisses. So they like to basically be spoiled, and their love language is sort of through action and through, you know, signs and gestures. They also describe that they're silly, they're puppies, so they're young, and they will follow you anywhere. So again, we have this you, which is not yet fully clear, and I don't believe it ever ends up becoming explicit who this you is. So again, are they singing to an individual person that only they know, or is this to their audience, their fan base, or someone else? We just don't know. But within the thesis of this poem, the you, they're saying, you know, to whoever they're speaking to, they're loyal, they're not going to run away, but they also will follow you anywhere, which, you know, conjures up expressions like, you know, how I would go to the gates of hell with this person because I trust them, and, you know, it doesn't matter where they're leading me to, I will follow them because I trust in their guidance, their wisdom, and also their intention in that they wouldn't lead me into a bad place. And then the two of them join in here, and here again we get that blend word in which we see Fuwa and Moko become Fuwamoco. So that's sort of the payoff to that chanting. They say Fuwamoco together, again doubling down on that blend. Take us along with you, barking oh so merrily. And this last part is sort of important because they sort of have a good understanding of sort of the connotation of barking. I think a lot of times with dogs and dog characters, etc., the connotation is that barking is sort of harsh because there's sort of a consonance to it. It's kind of a harder word to say. You know, if you're thinking of the musicality of poetry, you know, you have soft sounding words and then you have barking. There's the R's and the king to it. So, you know, that's very reminiscent of like an angry dog barking, or a guard dog barking at, you know, a chain link fence, and it's this intimidating, scary sort of situation. But here they're saying, no, don't worry. They're not barking because they're mad or defensive or protective. Oh, and also before I do that, I realized I forgot to talk about the rhyme scheme in this portion. So, kind of interesting. Mokoko's passage seems to rhyme a lot more than Fuwawa's. So, here we have merrily, me, and tricky. But there's also sort of a near rhyme with walkies, because it has to be plural because she's saying she likes lots of them. But spiritually, that would have been a rhyme with walkie. But anywhere is not. So that gets, let's say, that gets some red. So anywhere does not seem to rhyme with anything else in the passage. So, oh, and also you. So these two don't rhyme with anything, but it is interesting to note that. Ooh, this is actually really interesting. If you'll give me a moment. So here we have Mokoko's passage that almost entirely rhymes with, the inclusion of this near rhyme. And then her last line, she doesn't rhyme, which when a rhyme scheme breaks or ceases to be consistent, it draws your attention to it. And that's sort of the last part of Mokoko's passage. And then together they jump in. They do another line that doesn't rhyme, but then they end on a note that rhymes and harmonizes, therefore, with the first part of Mokoko's passage. So when Fuwawa joins in with Mokoko, at first they have a moment of not rhyming, but then they click in together and they begin to rhyme together with the previous passage, which is actually really cool. All right, and so now we have our next passage, and here, once again, we need to have both the original and the translation up. But again, sort of interestingly, the Japanese lines, when translated over to English, actually rhyme within the English. So we get together and ever, and those actually rhyme a lot closer than in the beginning, which is just extremely interesting to me, because again, getting into the philosophy of how translation works within the realm of poetry, this is actually like a really good translation, and I'm not sure if it's actually an official translation or not. It's extremely fascinating. But anyway, yeah, let's jump into this passage. So we have it's Showtime, Lifetime, Showtime, Anytime. So here we have some sort of like internal rhymes, rather than them being end rhymes, although there are the end rhymes here. Although, there's not really rhyme here and there, but those internal rhymes kind of creates why this is such a catchy part of the song, because it feels like you're getting like a rapid fire series of rhymes, because even when there's an internal rhyme, it's followed up by another rhyme, although it is an exact rhyme of Showtime and Showtime. But then you get Anytime, another internal rhyme. So that's super interesting. It's also interesting going back to sort of this thesis of it having a degree of like, let's go, the moment is now. It is a lifetime Showtime. It is the Showtime of your life. And, Anytime also implies a sense of like, ready to go. So it's sort of like, when do you want to, go to the store, or when do you want to go to the beach, is something that's actually more fun. And if your response is anytime, that means that you're ready. So if the other person were to say, let's go right now, you would be ready to do it. So once again, it's all about that, like, in the moment, ready to seize the day, ready to go, which is really cool to see. And here we also get sort of this this message of, again, like loyalty and friendship and a desire to spend time with this other person who is this sort of, let's say mysterious you. Because again, we don't know if it's a collective or not. But what is sort of interesting is as we go further into this song, I'm starting to notice a bit of a more, I guess, specific message, but also sort of an undertone, which is that it almost feels like you have, Fuwamoco, and then you have this you person or group or whatever, And it almost feels like a big part of the song is it's Fuwamoco sort of trying to stir or motivate this you, because we're not getting a response from the quote unquote you. There's no, this is in second person and there's no call and response to that degree. So here we have it where Fuwamoco, and both Fuwawa and Mokoko, are saying to this you, like, just call anytime. I'm just a bark away. Your smile is this treasure I want to protect. I love walking. You don't need a leash if we walk together. Like, I love spending time with you. Here they're saying, we'll do it anytime. They want to be together with you and they want to sing with you. So, you can almost picture if it was like a either sad or sleepy person who's just like laying in bed, they're demotivated, or just, whether they're demotivated from being sad or from being tired or burned out or whatever. And then it's almost like you have this, this pep talk cheerleader line of Fuwamoco where they're basically like, come on, it's showtime, let's go hang out together. You don't even have to do anything extreme, just a quick call and we'll be there. We're ready to hang out with you, because they enjoy spending time with this person so much. And it's sort of interesting seeing the message evolve from them just being like, oh, we're Fuwamoco and your smile means a lot to us, to starting to understand more of the relationship between them and this you. Here they say, stars wink, there's a moon spotlight and a fur everglow. So, there we get a little pun. But also it's sort of interesting because we're starting to get some nature imagery, which goes back to Romanticism, because Romanticism was very much about taking, the individual, the collective, and also seeing how those interact within nature, how they see reflection of themselves in nature, how nature reflects itself on humanity and the individual. And so here it's almost as if their furs are glowing in the moon spotlight and in the sort of winking starlight. So it's a very beautiful image, but it's also sort of not only an image of the nature of the stars and the moonlight, but it is an image of how that starlight and that moonlight, which serves as like a spotlight, how it sort of shines down on Fuwamoco. And so that pun actually does a lot there, rather than just being a silly pun on Forever and Ever, especially as we see that they're not doing the pun here, unless in Japanese that's a pun. I will admit I don't speak Japanese, so I'm not sure. But here we get the pun, and at the very least our translation doesn't give the pun there, which puts all the more emphasis on, well, why did they put the pun there instead of just saying a normal, forever glow? Because they're not saying that the moon spotlight and the starlight is forever glowing. It's almost more like it's forever glowing on their fur, which again, it's the comparison and the imagery of themselves within this light. There's also something interesting to be said about the fact that starlight and moonlight doesn't forever glow. Once the sun goes up, although the sun's a star, but once the sun goes up, you don't see the rest of the stars winking, and obviously you don't see the spotlight of the moon. And so in that sense, it kind of goes back a little bit to that sort of carpe diem, seize today, anytime. When someone says anytime to you, like, oh, when do you want to go on this fun date? Or when do you want to go get ice cream? When someone says anytime, they don't mean 7 years from now. It's actually an implied, let's go right now. And the implication's interesting with this sort of whole carpe diem vibe we've got going on. All right, and so here we get our next passage, which is sort of interesting in that it's sort of like a flashback. They are now going from that present that we've been living in for most of the song, and they're actually going back in time, flashback, and a flashback notably within literature, almost always serves to provide further context. So, they are now trying to provide context for why they are so carpe diem, why they are so let's go, 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 let's do this anytime. I'm just, a call away. So let's look at this as being context for what we've already read thus far in this poem and see what sort of stuff is revealed to us. So, way back then, which is an ambiguous point of time, they were all locked up and they were stuck in the cell. Now, inherently, the language of this already tells us that this is a bad thing. But, their use of language is being locked up and stuck in the cell because, I don't know, if their attitudes were differently for it, they would describe it as being like all snug in the cell or all cozied up in the cell, something like that. So their choice of language is actually telling us, what their actual opinion is and how they feel about it. They think of it as being locked up, which has a negative connotation to it. Also notably, there don't seem to be any real rhymes here. And yet there's a lot of that consonance again, where it's back, locked, stuck, kept. It's like burst. It's these sort of harsher sounding words again, rather than being sort of a soft lilt throughout the poetry of it. So through that sort of harshness, usually that kind of thing is used in sort of a harsher, more aggressive or just like negative context. So again, by their use of these words, they're telling us just by the way things sound that it's bad. And that is really cool with language and poetry, in that if you didn't speak English and someone was doing a sort of dramatic reading of this, you would still be able to tell that this was a negative part. I was locked up. We were stuck in the cell, holding back, doggy dog, kept, sealed away. It's like, that doesn't sound like they're having a fun time. However, what's also interesting is by being stuck in a cell, we often imply, or not imply, but infer with cell that, that's like a prison cell rather than like a monastery cell or something else. And so one of those things that's sort of like the cultural resonance with this is that cells in prison, we think of prison sentences which are very long. You could get a life sentence or 15-year sentence, however long it is. And part of the punishment of being locked up for that long is that it is stealing valuable time from that person. It's the length of it. It's supposed to be, during that time, you're being punished for that long. You're losing that many years. And you're also, supposed to reflect during that time, etc. But the point being is that the real punishment is that we, as a society, see value in time. We understand that, time is one of the most precious resources. And so here they're lamenting the fact that they were locked up and that they were stuck in a cell and that they were being held back and kept sealed away. So, it's basically implied within that they were, they lost time when they were stuck in the cell. This wasn't, I was in a cell for 5 minutes, and you wouldn't really describe a 5-second long jail experience as being all locked up and stuck and held back. It would be brief and, proportionately 5 seconds or even 5 minutes wouldn't seem that bad. It wouldn't seem like you'd lost that much time. So if you're describing it this way, it's implied that you've lost a great deal of time. And why that matters is that sort of provides some context for why now they're saying, well, now it's showtime. Now it's time to go out, do your thing, pursue a future that's super bright, stand in the starlight and hang out with us. We want to defend, your smile. We want to hang out with you because time is so valuable. And previously we lost all the time and we weren't able to do those things. So now it's like, oh, well, when do you want to hang out? Anytime. Let's hang out even right now, because they know what it's like to have lost time by being prisoners. And then they further elaborate on this by saying, they are meant to be free, which is also a very English romantic mentality. Coleridge, Byron, and even Wordsworth, they wrote a lot about wanting to reform the prison system and wanting to, they wrote, I believe Coleridge has a poem about the dungeon, and in that he basically states that it would be so much better to reform prisoners by basically putting them out in nature and just having them do simple natural work. If they were to just be cutting trees, tending to a garden, all of that, the actual action of that, of being in nature and being out of society where there's these needs and wants which could corrupt someone. If they don't have those needs and wants and they're able to live a more simple life, that would actually reform them better. And these poets believe that that level of reforming someone was much better than punishing them, because society would be better from just a positive society full of reformed people rather than the society being burdened by having to also punish people, because by punishing them you sort of darken yourself. And so here they're meant to be free, they're meant to be in that nature of that moonlight and that starlight. And it's also an allusion to the narrators and the personas personal story, in which this artist was at one point locked up. I believe they were also locked up with Nerissa and Shiori and Koseki Biju, and so they all broke out, and so they're also recounting their own personal life story. So this isn't hypothetical. They're not daydreaming of one day breaking out, but they actually did break out. And in the moment, they put it in the present tense. They don't say, "Oh, then we made a break for it." They didn't made a break for it. They're make a break for it. So almost by reliving this exciting moment, they're right back into the present tense, and which also shows how this is such a significant moment for them. So they make a break for it, they break out of it, and then what do they do with this freedom? They don't do it to do more crime, the more things that could get them in jail. They merely want to have playtime, which is sort of conjures up a sense of juvenile bliss, of sort of easier, simpler times when you had no other intention but then just to have fun. There's no other context, there's no other motives. It's just have some fun, have some playtime. And that's why they want to have playtime with the narrator, or not the narrator, the sort of subject or addressee of this poem. So yeah, this part's actually super important because it provides all that context. Now we know why they have this sense of urgency, and why they also personally have this perspective on having fun and time. It's not only why do they want it, but also they value it so much more because they went through this period where they weren't able to do any of that. And so that sort of flashback context, which then almost goes into the present as they describe breaking out, sort of continues in this portion, in which their paws are hitting the pavement, and by hitting the pavement, that implies a sort of sense of speed, of running. They're not softly walking, they're not slowly walking, their paws are slamming down on the pavement because they're running at such a speed. And with that energy, they have all these dreams sparkling in their eyes. And one of those dreams, which is plural, is to keep this you smiling. Again, don't know who the you is, but whoever this you is, part of their motivation to break out of jail, they want to break out so they can keep this person smiling. And then as sort of a humorous allusion to one of their tendencies on stream and their frequency of sneezing. They say, but my sneezes won't stop flying by, which, just kind of a fun, silly line that implies that as they are doing this epic jailbreak and have this epic motivation of keeping someone smiling forever, they're also still being waylaid a bit by these sneezes. No real rhyme scheme that I'm seeing here at a quick look. Although we do get some internal rhymes. Let's get some blue. We got smilin', sparklin', flyin'. So actually we do have some rhymes. Some internal rhymes there. And eyes and by are, again, they're near rhymes. They're pretty similar. If it was just I and by, they would rhyme. But grammatically, it has to be plural, because it would be weird if they had a dream sparkling in just one of their eyes. And so they use the plural eyes, which makes it a near rhyme. Pavement, not really, doesn't rhyme with smiling or anything like that. But the other thing is within this passage is, again, they're also continuing with their imagery of them being dogs. So we get paws instead of feet. Their sneezes, one could argue, is sort of like a dog-esque thing. At the very least, my dog used to sneeze all the time. And then I really enjoy this passage because here they sort of change their subject in a way, in that they're no longer really talking to this you, but they're instead talking to each other, because they're now celebrating that bond. Again, the Fuwa plus Moco, which we see in that sort of chant that's repeated throughout the song. It's that bond that they share as twins, which we now realize that they're not just sisters, they're twins. It's irreplaceable to them. Ultimately, that bond is so valuable to them. And as a pair, they're unbreakable, which again goes back to sort of that self-patriotism that I was describing earlier, which is sort of like a celebration of the self, and the self is sort of an identity. In that, they're saying that they're an unbreakable pair. So even though they had this sort of darker period in which they describe being locked up in a cell and being, just stuck there, and, even though they had all these dreams, even throughout that, they were unbreakable. That time period didn't break them. And even though sometimes they can be scared, they're young, they don't have it all figured out, they're not old, gray bearded dogs, they are puppy dogs, they're young, they don't have it all figured out, but they have this bond with each other. And that pair makes them that bond makes them a pair unbreakable. We're all that use of that is like, again, this thesis is not just one, not just the other, and it's not just them with you, as in it's not just Fuwawa plus this you, and it's not Mococo plus this you, but instead it is them together plus this you. And then we get and that's why, in which they then go back into their whole chorus. But yeah, you're starting to see this celebration of Carpe Diem, the celebration of, living in the moment. You're starting to see why that matters to them. And you're also seeing this repeated sentiment of them being a pair and a team, which is really, really cool to see. And so here we get this passage again where they say, that's why, always, it's that day, today, not tomorrow, lifetime, showtime. So again, it's that Carpe Diem sense. It's that, expression of, that's why, it doesn't matter. Don't wait for the future. And also, don't linger on the past. It's that day today. Live in the present. Enjoy the present. Don't wait for tomorrow. Also, as a small interesting thing, as someone who doesn't speak Japanese, it is interesting that the actual sound of Itsudate is very similar to It's That Day, though this translates to always. It's a very, very cool way of sort of having a kind of a rhyme in that way. They sound so similar. It creates that really like extremely catchy chorus and just catchy sound to the whole song. But yeah, so Carpe Diem, Forever and Ever, Walk With You. They're once again expressing their values. They said previously it was, oh, I enjoy walks and you could call me at any time. I would be, always, I'm ready. And now they're expressing walk with you in the present. So it's not let's walk together. It's walk with you. And even though they're acknowledging that there were bad times, as there are good times, it doesn't matter to them. They're stating in this, even though they had the time in jail, all that, they're not going to let that define them, and they're not going to let that hold them back. Instead, they're just going to live in the moment and celebrate those connections and bonds and relationships that mean so much to them. There's not really a rhyme scheme always and day, although this is a translation, are pretty similar. And then we get day, and then they kind of call back to day. Bow Bow doesn't rhyme with anything. And then lifetime, showtime, that's sort of an internal rhyme there. Forever and ever, matter, kind of close. I would call those more of a near rhyme though, because really you get that ver sound rather than just the and here we get the ter sound rather than just the You get a bit of an internal exact rhyme with times and times, but nothing really rhymes with you. So yeah, let's jump into the next part. And here we just get a short passage that's mostly a repeat of before, but interestingly at the end they describe themselves now as happy, lucky puppy sisters, when previously they were saying they might just be scaredy puppy dogs, I believe was the line. And so also it's kind of cool as we get further into the song, there's sort of this like expression of self becomes more and more positive and more, cemented in that positivity. So that's pretty cool to see. All right, and here we get our next passage, and this is sort of an interesting passage because at this part of the song they're sort of going away from the sort of main message they're describing, and now they're once again talking to this you. Some of it is in Japanese, so take a note of that. But here, again, you have these characters who had this really bad experience in this jail, and at one point, they describe themselves as being scaredy puppy dogs, but now they're getting more confident in who they are and who their sense of self is. Again, Fuwawa is stating now in the present that she is Fuwawa down to her tail, her heart, and her soul. And here we're also seeing them have the, basically having the confidence and assertion to know how they want to be treated and what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. And now we have a callback to one of their more popular expressions as artists, in which once again they're introducing themselves. And within that introduction, there's that sense of self. It's not just hi, it's I'm Fuwawa, I'm Mokoko, and also Mokoko is separating herself from Fuwawa, but not in a negative way. It's not an aggressive, I'm not that person, but it's still a celebration of self. Well, I'm Mokoko. Don't get us mixed up. And then also similar to Fuwawa is saying she's not just, a random nameless dog or anything like that. She's Fuwawa. And then with this moment where it almost seems like they're introducing themselves separately, this is who I am, this is who I am, they then once again assert that they are together. They are a pair, they are, they're sisters, they're a unit together. They are twin demon guard dog sisters. Yeah. So here it's also interesting. We get a little bit more lore as to who they are. They're demon guard dogs, which is interesting, sort of a juxtaposition. Guard dogs I tend to almost associate with prison, but their trauma, if you will, within the context of the song is a prison, which is pretty interesting and really goes to show that, who you are doesn't necessarily have to define you. So, they seem to be a lot less interested in being guard dogs than they are interested in having fun, although they do like to guard smiles. So, this is actually pretty interesting. Basically, you have this where they were guard dogs who, there was this expectation that they would be guarding a prison, because that's what, society tends to use guard dogs for. And then, but since they had a negative experience with prison, they have now chosen to instead guard the things that they value. So they are now once again asserting more their own sense of self and what they value, even if it contradicts what society thinks they should value guarding and protecting. And that celebration of self, especially as it contrasts with society, is an extremely interesting thing that you might not pick up on just an initial listen, but this is really sort of a thesis statement of identity and sort of a rejection of societal norms, and just sort of a celebration that of their own discovery of what it is that they value, and their newfound confidence of no longer being scaredy dogs. They're now confident in protecting and guarding the things that matter to them. All right, we're getting sort of close to the end here, but in this next passage we sort of get an interesting final main message, because after this point, most of it is chorus and repeating lines that were previously already stated. So we won't be doing as much of a close reading of that. But here, they are now speaking directly to the you again. They want you to gather up our dreams, and suddenly you'll come to realize there's as many as there are stars illuminating in the night sky. So at first, when you hear that, especially out of context, as I'm sort of breaking it up like this, you might think, what are they telling the you to gather up specifically Fuwamoco and Mokoko's dreams? So it's sort of like, what about the you's dreams? But it's really not the case. Instead, they are now including the you within that hour. So that hour is actually, Fuwamoco, Mokoko, and the you. So gather up all of our dreams together, and you'll come to realize there's as many as there are stars illuminating the night sky, which is a pretty cool little simile at the end. Since we have as, they're describing the quantity of this to basically, they're comparing it to how many stars there are in the night sky. So here it's sort of interesting because they've been stating so confidently previously that, there isn't a tomorrow, or at least don't wait for tomorrow. Live in the present, live in today, and we're going to protect your smile and, think about how great the future will be. But because their dreams are never ending, they suddenly have a moment of doubt. They say, we don't know if they can all be achieved. But despite that doubt, they're going to keep going on forever, together here with you. And there's something so romantic, almost in a sort of Byronic sense. Lord Byron, he sort of created this sort of Byronic hero who sort of has this at times self-deprecating tone, but there's also sort of this smiling in the face of death, or smiling in the face of total adversity kind of vibe going on with some of his writing, which is very much reminiscent of this sort of age of revolution. Around the time we've got the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, things were changing. And so here, they're saying, we don't know if it can be achieved. We can't promise that. We can't say every single one of these never-ending dreams, all of this endless ambition can be fulfilled. But regardless of not knowing if we can, they're going to keep on trying and they're going to keep on going, rather than saying, oh, well, I'll never achieve all of my dreams, so what's the point? Why should I even try? They're saying the exact opposite. They're saying, even if we don't know if we can achieve this all, and it's sort of an optimistic thing, because they're saying that it's not that their one dream is unobtainable and therefore they live in this sort of pessimistic state, but it's sort of an acknowledgement that they're such dreamers, they're such, hopeful people and optimistic and endlessly ambitious and endlessly hopeful of wanting to achieve so much that they don't know if they can actually keep up with those dreams and ambitions. But regardless, they're going to keep going on. They're going to keep pursuing them. They're going to keep living in the moment day by day by day, which is a really beautiful, poetic sentiment, and it's made all the better by the fact that they're going to not be doing this alone, but they're going to be doing it together with you. All right, and that brings us now to this final little passage we're going to be looking at. Again, an acknowledgement that some of it's in Japanese, but we're looking at the translation. But here they end it where they sort of wrap it all up together. They once again repeat the sentiment that it is showtime. They want to be together. They are Fuwawa, they are Mokoko. These are separate, but they are hand in hand together with you. And once again, they say that now bring your smile, which they've already said is like a treasure to them. They're going to protect it. Not, we might protect it, we'll try to protect it. They are confident they will protect it. And here, this rain or shine is almost an illusion, where it's saying basically, even if we get locked back into that cell, even if we go through past troubles and they become, present troubles, even if it's not always the perfect conditions, they're using nature to try to describe sort of a dark versus a light, a rain or a shine, good weather, bad weather, good conditions, bad conditions. They're going to protect that smile, and throughout it, they're not going to forget their pledge to protect this smile to you, this you once again. And then they go on to continue their chants, celebrating their identities, their bonds, their connections, and their joy of living in the moment. So through this poem, we've learned so much. We've learned who they are. We've learned what they value. We learned why they value it. We learned, their backstory, who they were. And also, again, this celebration of, defining one's self. And and the song almost serves as them giving their thesis statement or almost their definition of who they are. And that's why at the end of it, they're even calling this a pledge. They're making it, it is a formal statement. It is a document stating what they value, who they are, who they were, what the relationship is to each other, and what the relationship is to you. So with that, I think that basically concludes this close reading of this Fuwamoco song, Lifetime Showtime. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I had a ton of fun doing this. It's nice to basically brush the dust off of my English degree and get to use it a little bit. And if you guys want to see more content like this, I would really appreciate it if you could give this video a like and let me know in the comments, maybe suggest other things to take a look at. I think it'd be really fun to look at the poetics of things that aren't always necessarily presented as poems, but it's more things like songs or the poetics of a character from a video game or something like that. I think that could be a lot of fun. And if you want to see more content like this and you want to make sure that you're notified when there will be more content. I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe. It just helps grow the channel and helps get this out to more people, and it's just exciting to see this channel grow, since this is all sort of a passion project of mine. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap this up. So take care, and I will see you in the next video.